Great. So, hello everyone. I know we're a big group and I'm so excited by that. I wish we could see each other and be together and do this like I would do a normal writing workshop. But really quickly, since you probably don't know me, I'll let you know a little bit about myself. I'm a writer primarily. My book arts work is I use making books as part of my writing process. And so I also make handmade books, but I'm not a skilled binder. I admit that. And I use book arts as a way to cut through my writing obstacles. But I used to teach at Cal State Long Beach. I taught creative writing, composition, and education classes. I also was on the faculty of Bard College for their Institutes of Writing and Thinking and Language and Thinking. So some of what we're doing will be informed by all my teaching experience. I've had a lot of different kinds of students. I've taught at a maximum security prison for women outside of New York. I've taught with young children in nursing homes to bring stories to life. So I've had a lot of different audiences, and I have to say too, I'm a person who lives with a disability. So Zoom has made my life completely different. I now have access to things I don't have access to in my regular body. So I long for the day when we can mingle and be together. I do, but I really hope organizations will keep a Zoom component to what they do, because for those of us who are basically housebound, but still creative and producing, it's really wonderful. So that's as much as I'm going to say about me for now. I have a couple of books. I have a lot of chapbooks. I ran a small press for about 10 years, publishing primarily poetry, pedagogy, and cultural studies, Palm Press. I'm no longer doing that. I'm no longer teaching, but I'm still writing, and I'm still teaching workshops like this. So the way this workshop is going to happen today is I'm going to try to get us to write a lot. So my goal for you is by the end that you're going to have a bunch of your own stuff that you can maybe use, discard, look at, build on. But that's my goal, is to really get us to generate some work. That's the way I teach. I've taught that way for 20 years. So I'm going to keep doing it today. But I will let you in on the secret of who gave us these awesome skills. Peter Elbow. Peter Elbow is an academic and a writing teacher and a wonderful human being. And he has many, many books, but these, for the layperson, if you're somebody who cares about your writing and you want to work on it, these books are fantastic. They give you exercises to do. They're really supportive. They admit the fact that writing is a difficult act. You know, it's a physical act and a mental act, and you're doing them simultaneously. So Peter Elbow is wonderful. And a lot of what we're about to do right now comes straight out of his teachings. So, and also because a lot of you, you're artists, you're creative people, you may have done some of these things before. So that's cool. I invite you to do them again and see what might emerge from your imagination. So that's me. And the first thing I wanted to do is something from Peter Elbow. It's called a private Freewrite. And the Freewrite, it's totally free. You can put whatever you want in it. You don't have to spell correctly. You don't have to make sense. As long as you can pull the coherence out of it, that's all that needs to happen. You just want to start getting words on the page. So the private Freewrite lasts about 1 minute, which seems so brief, and yet when you're in it, it might feel long. So the goal of this exercise as well is to keep writing, to not put your pen or pencil down. Always in my past practice, we're writing longhand. But again, if you're a person who needs an adaptability situation, you're typing, do what works for you. But so here we go. We're going to start writing. The private Freewrite is completely open-ended. I've got a timer. We're going to go for 1 minute. Think of this as if you exercise. This is like stretching. You know, it's like getting ready before you go on a little jog or do something. So let's go. 1, 2, 3. If you run out of things to write, just write, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, and something will eventually percolate in your brain. And we have about 10 seconds left. And try to find a place to stop. And we're going to move right on from that. We're going to leave that writing where it is. The private free write, like I said, it's like a warm-up to get your brain going. You're dealing with language and you're getting in there. The next thing we're going to do is called a focused free write. And this is also from Peter Elbow. And the focused free write is probably what you're used to thinking of as a prompt. So I'm going to go back to our last month's meeting. And at the very end, I asked people to think, what is your superpower? And you might not think you have one. I know that you do. But if you really don't think you have one, think of somebody in your life who has one, a nurse, an educator, a caregiver. Those people often have superpowers. So we're going to take, again, just a quick minute and a half to write about your superpower. And if you really don't believe you have one, you may write about that, but I bet you do. So you ready? Write about your superpower. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. And we've got about 30 seconds left. And then start to bring that writing to a close. Just find a place to stop. Okay, so when you've done that, your superpower writing, if you would look back over it and circle one word that you feel captures what you meant and we're trying to convey. And we're going to hear some of these. So if you could just take a few, a little bit, just to circle a word that jumps out at you, a phrase. I should look at my own. And then Laurel, if you wouldn't mind fielding people's voices in a moment. Okay, have folks got stuff circled? Well, I'm going to throw out this invitation. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
yeah,
I was on mute. So do you want me to do it the way that we had talked about it?
Yeah, if we
Okay.
could. I would love if people could just quickly say their word, because we want to hear some of what people are coming up with. Like, even though we're together, we're totally alone. So I want to hear our language.
Do you want me to just, everybody has the ability to unmute themselves by touching either
Okay.
doing
Do
it
you think
online?
we can manage it that way?
I'm asking you, do you want me to do it where they sign up in the chat?
I think if people just do it, oh, look, color instinct. People are just putting it into the chat. Let's just type it in the
How do you
chat
do?
if that's
You type,
easier.
how do you go to, you just press on chat? I've never done that.
Yes.
Oh, people's stuff
Okay.
is great. Keep showing up.
Yeah. Just go into the chat and just type
Constant.
something in.
These are great, you guys. These are great.
Okay.
Curiosity, making new connections. I think someone wrote paper recognition, which is awesome. These are great. So if you feel compelled to keep putting them in, mine is resilience. I'm not going to type it in, but that's mine. These are great. I knew you had them. I knew it. Pattern recognition. No, please. We need you. Okay, thanks. So if we could take that to a close, but that's basically how we're going to work. We're going to try to put some stuff in chat, and Laurel and I are trying to figure out the getting to the talking. We'll get there later when we have a little more substance.
Okay.
At this point, thank you, everybody. Oh, you insisted. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for putting your language out there, because I know sometimes in writing workshops, people can feel a little just not totally certain or confident or wanting to share. So I salute you for throwing yourself in. I just have to check my notes for 1 minute to see if there's anything I want to show you. But there's not. We're going to get back to something. So I realize I'm asking you to kind of switch tack quickly. It's because of the length of the workshop, and I want you to leave with words. And I also want you to leave with exercises. So this is another one that we're going to build on, okay? Very quickly, because we're going to spend a little bit of time with this writing, more than what we just did. Could you write down about 3 to 5 subjects that really interest you? And they don't have to be important. They don't have to impress anyone. They just have to be the things that really interest you. I love birds. I'm not a birder, but I love birds. I love good food, but I no longer like to cook. Like 5 subjects are important to you. It doesn't matter what they are. 3 to 5. Let's take like 30 seconds to do that. Let's go. And we have about 10 seconds left with this. And then if you could try to bring that to a close. So you should just have a little list of subjects that you have an interest in, whatever they are. It's the stuff that you're interested. Okay. So you've got the subjects that interest you. Now I'm going to take you through a different experience. We're going to let that list just be there for a moment. And then we're going to go into a writing exercise. This is an excellent book of resources for writers. I know it's particular to poetry, but actually it has a lot of abstract stuff in it, and things is not, like a villanelle or a sonnet. But sometimes it can be a great challenge to make yourself write one of those, to follow the form, to follow a poetic form. You might really surprise yourself with what you come up with. But the list poem this is edited by Ron Padgett. And the list poem is very useful for getting writing going. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and then we're going to start working on our own. Not necessarily poetry, but this idea of a list. So excuse me, the Iliad, in book 2 of the Iliad, there's a very famous list of all of the ships that are going to Troy, I think, all of the ships and all of the sea captains. And let's see, I'll take you with me. Of these, there came 50 ships, and on board of each went young men of the Boeotians in 120. And they that dwelt in Asphodon and Orchomenus of the Mynae were led by, I'm totally faking these names, Ascalaphus and Eomenus, son of Ares. but it's this really intensive inventory of all of the men. Primarily, there is a woman or two in the list who are going to war on their ships. So that's one example of like the list poem. Another great example actually comes from the Bible. In the very beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it's the list of all the begats, the list of the lineage. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness and in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. And it goes on and on and on and builds. So the list poem has been very inspirational to poets. And I'm going to give you a little bit from Walt Whitman, whose very famous book, Leaves of Grass, arguably is a massive list poem. So here's a tiny bit from it. It's very beautiful because he's talking about the universality of America and how we are all part of the same difficult thing. And we're in a moment like that again now. So he says, a southerner soon as a northerner, a planter nonchalant and hospitable down by the Ontse I live, a Yankee bound by my own way, ready for trade, my joints, the limberest joints on earth and the sternest joints on earth, a Kentuckian walking the Vale, a boatman over the lakes. He keeps going, he keeps listing all these different people all over the United States, and we're all engaged in this project of citizenship, of living together, of being American, of being ourselves. So a more contemporary example of that is by a very well-known American poet and scholar, Charles Bernstein, who's also a wonderful human being. So this is a little chapbook. It's like bridging book arts. It's not technically book arts. The cover is very beautiful, but it is by a book artist, Charles Alexander. So this is not letterpress. Well, anyway, this is a book of Charles called Let's Just Say. So one way you can do the list poem is you start with these little words at the beginning and you just riff. You just keep going. So Charles's poem, I'm not going to read you too much of. An Afghani eating pastrami, a provincial walking on the peninsula, a Eurasian boy on a cell phone, an Arab with an umbrella. I mean, he could be inventorying stuff he's seeing while he's traveling or sitting in a park in New York. So that's enough for me about the list poem. But Shack's Press is in Tucson, Arizona. They make beautiful handmade books, and this is one of them. Now, what I did is I ripped off Charles and I just took Let's Just, and then I have this long poem of mine that I did as an art project over the summer of taking Let's Just and then filling in the blank. And I ended up with a poem that I like, which doesn't happen all the time. So for what it's worth, we are going to do some list writing. And again, with the list, don't worry about spelling. Try not to, don't edit. Just keep going. You can edit like later. But the goal right now is to just list. Okay, so we're going to go back to those 5 things you just wrote down, and I'd like you to choose one you want to focus on for a little bit in this mode of listing. So choose one you have some information about. Let's see. Lost my list. Well, and I'm going to do anyway. Once you have your subject that you want to work with, I want us to try to almost exhaust our imaginations on this thing. So we're going to take 2 minutes, which I know it doesn't sound like much, and yet try to write down everything you can think of about that subject and the things you don't know about it, questions you have, anything that comes to mind that is linked to that subject. In this 2 minutes of writing, just try to get it out and onto your page. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, then let's just try to get some words out. Let's go. Here goes our 2 minutes. So we have 1 more minute with this. Try to keep pushing, even if you feel like you're petering out. And take another 20 seconds with this. And then start to bring that writing to a close. And if you finished, could you underline one line out of that writing that you feel like gets at the essence of what really interests you about that thing, or like your main hook into your subject? See if there's anything you wrote that gives you a hint about why you're interested in that thing. And if you could underline it, that would be great. And take just like a minute to do that. It doesn't have to be a sentence. It can be a fragment. It can be 2 words. Up to you. Okay, so hopefully folks have found a little bit of language, because at this point, I would like to hear you read that. So we need a few volunteers, and because we're a big group, we need about 3 or 4 people just who would be willing to read what you just underlined, you know, like the essence of that thing. What is it you're attracted to that makes you think about it, like it, love it, hate it, whatever. So if there are 3 or 4 people who would be willing to let us know, maybe with a thumbs up in the chat, that might be a way of letting us know your game. And maybe Laurel, you could call on the thumbs uppers. Would that work?
Maybe they can just put their name in the chat.
Sure, sure, yeah.
Just the first 3 people to say I will, basically, in the chat.
That's great.
Call on them.
Thanks. Okay, so it looks like Rosemary's Game and Chip.
And Susan
Porter.
Okay, so we've got the first 3 for this.
Okay. Oh, look, I love it. I'm so psyched you will. We'll keep you for next time, I promise. But let's start with those first 3, if you wouldn't mind. If you would, without like declaimers, exclamations, just read what you wrote, please.
Let's just taste. Let's just be an accomplice. Let's just lemon, tomato. Let's just do a pulp dance. Let's just survive, all magnificent as a pear. Let's just salt, shimmy. Let's just pepper. Now pause. Let's just paint with pears, apples, dishes, and crisp air. Let's just breathe. Let's just be. Let's just savor, make a sandwich, and sit.
Thank you.
Counter space relationship, such history, such arrogance, so beautiful. Put them together, make thoughts. Helvetica, really? Oh no, not that face. Bell, Bulmer, Benkwhite, Kaslan, Jensen, Garriman, national and international love of letters. Why put that face with the other? They don't compliment, they sing. I now understand what they mean, gibberish.
Thank you. I think we have 1 more person. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My happiness is proportional to how much paper and paint I have, how many blank books and pens I have, how much inspiration plows out of me when I have the energy to follow through, how much color I can muster to flow together in a blank book, on a paper, on a bag, an old book, a gum wrapper, a napkin, how many words and images explode onto the pages.
Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for reading, and for others who volunteered, we'll get to you, and maybe by the end we'll get to hear everybody, or at least all those who want to read. But I want to move along a little bit quickly from the list to something that is similar to the list. It should come to you easily. And this is one that if Sia, I'm not sure if she's here with us today. I know she's done it before.
Gina.
Okay, good. I have to hit her twice. This is a writing exercise that's been around for a long time, since the 70s, possibly 60s, by a New York poet who died of AIDS in the 80s. His name was Joe Brainerd. And the exercise, my computer, is kind of like what I just showed you with the let's just, where you can take a few words at the beginning and then you kind of fill in the sentence. So I remember is totally memoir. This is your life. And keep in mind, our memories aren't necessarily, they don't keep their integrity necessarily. So I find more and more I'm making up memories. I'll tell my husband, oh yeah, we did that. It was wonderful. Sean's like, we didn't even go there. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So if it's not a real memory, that's okay too. But the goal of the prompt is, I remember, is to get you just kind of riffing in like a multi-directional way of stuff you remember from your life. And I'll share with you just a teeny bit of Brainerd's. I say that as if I can do it. Yeah. So Joe Brainerd is really great because the way he's writing, he's really just writing like from his heart. I remember the only time I ever saw my mother cry. I was eating apricot pie. I remember when my father would say, keep your hands out from under the covers, as he said goodnight, but he said it in a nice way. I remember when I thought that if you did anything bad, policemen would put you in jail. I remember when polio was the worst thing in the world. But his goes on for pages and pages and pages. And that's kind of, we want to like tap into that vein if we can, just to let your memory go, like without control, almost as if you're watching like a montage of moments from your life. They don't have to be connected, but just let the I remember and then finish the statement, and then just go into another I remember and finish another statement. And we're going to do that for a couple of minutes as well. So again, as much as you may be getting tired of writing, we only have our 50 minutes. Try to push. I know it's hard. If you get burned out, just say, I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say, and something will pop up in your mind. It's crazy. So let's start off with I remember. And we're going to write on this for 2 minutes. I'll give you some time warnings. But before we start, did anybody have any questions or concerns? Okay, if they pop up, you can always use the chat to put them in there. But let's try this out. And also with this one, because you're totally in control of what you want to share or not share, write whatever you want. Let's go. So we have 1 more minute for this. See if you can haul out some more stuff. And we've got about 30 seconds left. And start to bring that writing to a close. Okay, and find a place to stop your pen, even if it doesn't feel complete, because I would love to hear some of these as well to get these out in the air. And for this one, I encourage you to read the whole thing if you feel comfortable doing that. If you don't, just selectively edit out what you don't want to share. But it would be great if we could hear, especially from some of those people at the tail end of our chat from before. I don't know if we still have them, but some volunteers to read their I Remember.
So it was Sushma and Barbara Mortkowitz were the two who didn't get to read last time. And if they want to read, they can go first. So Sushma has unmuted herself.
Great.
Go ahead, Sushma.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I remember when I was 6 or 7, and I thought I would build a room full of books when I grew up. I remember storing my share of chocolates and crying when the stash was all gobbled up by my elder brother. I remember I thought my father was the bravest, best man on earth. He is no more, but he remains so.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. And Barbara Mortkowitz is ready.
No, I pass. I
Oh,
didn't like
okay.
what I wrote.
Sorry.
No problem. Thanks anyway. So if there
Okay.
are others who want to read, that would be great. We
Just-
have a little time for this.
I'm not seeing anybody putting their name in the chat.
Okay, I'll read. I remember having sore throat too often. I remember my brothers torturing the toads and I did nothing. I remember pea shooters and I did not understand the why, as the why was not clear until later. I remember the northern lights in our backyard. Were they red, white, and blue? I don't remember. Maybe it was acid green.
Thank you. Denise Stevenson says she would like to read.
Great.
Sure. I remember when there was no internet, no computer, no seeing others on a phone call. I remember a time that the tree cracked as loudly as thunder, and I ran before it landed on my jacks. I remember staying out later than I was supposed to and changing the hands on my watch as if my mother would believe my lie.
I love that lie. Oh, thank you very much for reading. Are there other folks who'd like to read?
Andrea Factor says she will.
Great.
Andrea, can you unmute yourself?
Okay. I remember when all my grandchildren were born, all their birthdays, the many adorable things they say, beautiful family holiday dinners, walks on the beach, my first date with my husband, my engagement day, my wedding day, my first trip to Ireland on our honeymoon, Stanley's 50th birthday, my 40th birthday, my 50th birthday, my 70th birthday. The end.
Well, hopefully not.
No, the end today.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Sure. So if there aren't other people who want to read, I'm curious how this exercise went for you, if you're willing to talk about that, because not everything works for everybody. So it's also valuable if you're like, I got stuck, I felt private. I don't know. Is there anybody who's willing to share like their process, even if you don't feel like reading?
No.
That's totally fine too. Okay. So everyone who read, thank you very much. And one thing I forgot to say at the beginning is anytime you're in a workshop like this, because I believe writers to be terrific thieves in the best sense. If you hear cool language that somebody else shares, take it. You know, take it. I usually write down the person's name with it in case I do end up using it later. But sometimes people say stuff that will resonate with you or surprise you or like jangle a memory out of you. So keep track of the language you're hearing as well or seeing come up in the chat, because sometimes it's part of kind of my whole thesis for this workshop of making writing happen. So we're going to do some more writing in a second, but I want to do a teeny bit of show and tell. And while I do it, are there folks among you who were able to bring a piece of a piece of text from anywhere? It was in the materials, but I didn't push it too hard. Just a piece of text, anything. Do folks have that?
I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Some
Uh,
do?
I see one thumbs up.
Oh, Gina, great. Okay. If you don't have it, you can just check out the exercise. This is an old one, and it's from the Surrealists and the Dadaists. It's an exercise of erasure. Oh, Denise has one. Okay, so Denise, if you're willing to do it, do. But the way it works is you take a piece of text. It could be anything, sports, whatever. And you, the New Yorker is kind of too big. Let's say I'm only going to work with this piece. I'm just going to circle the words I like, and I'm going to cross everything else out, or I'm going to put stickers over it. I'm going to make a drawing over it, but I'm going to leave my words intact in their safe little circles like this. We'll do realized. So if you did bring a piece of writing, I just circled the word realized. You're just going to look at that piece of text, and your only focus is to circle words you like or that irritate you, whatever your criteria is. But don't use the whole thing, because you're going to end up blacking out a lot of it. And let me show you some examples of what I mean. One of the most famous books that does this, and many of you may know this book already, it's called A Humament. And Tom Phillips took like a discarded Victorian novel that was called A Human Monument. And through the process of blacking out and erasure, he made what has really become super famous book object. So this is erasure. He kept some of the language, and then he added all of this to block out the text. And the whole book, as you can see, but it's still the novel. This is all the language of the novel, but he's just altered it to suit his own purposes. And he's added a lot of art. There's also a newer book that I learned about from a workshop I took recently by a woman whose name is Sarah Sloat. She took Stephen King's book, Misery. It was some part of like a group assignment. They all got Stephen King books. This is her erasure of Misery. So she's just kept some of the language and transformed it into a completely different book. And obviously she's a skilled illustrator and artist, but that's how erasure works. You don't have to add fancy illustrations. I certainly could never do that. But if you just block out all the other words, you end up with a new piece of writing that was already in the piece of writing. So if you have a piece of text you can work with, see if you can just circle some of those words right now and cross off all the rest. Oh, the last book, sorry, I forgot to give it to you. Forgive me. It's called Almighty Hotel. And I've checked it out, and I get that she's using summary as Misery as the source text, but it's really its own thing. It's pretty cool. And her art is interesting. Yeah. Almighty Hotel, Sarah J. Sloat. So I don't have a sense of how many.
Lydia was asking single words or phrases to circle.
totally up to you. Because sometimes you don't want to break the phrase, you know? Let me see if Hamamet, I think he took phrases and words as well. I think they both give them that liberty, give themselves that liberty. Yeah. I'd say for me, when I'm doing this, the main thing is to look for language I'm attracted to for whatever reason. If maybe it bugs me, or it's really beautiful, or maybe it's a word from another language. I don't know what it is. But if anyone has finished one, I invite you to like show it. If there's a way to do that, if you can highlight yourself. I don't know if there is.
Well, if
Is it
somebody
too tricky?
if somebody puts their name in the chat, then I can
Okay,
share
cool.
the spotlight is what it's called, but I need
Great.
to know
Okay.
who it is.
Yeah, so does anyone have one they'd like to share? I know I'm asking you to do it very quickly. So that's okay. I'm going to move on because a lot of what I want to do is like give you stuff. So I'm going to give you something else that we're not going to do, but it's also from the Surrealists, the Dadaists. This is called cut-ups, and I only tape mine together so you can see them. This was a poem or writing, same kind of writing we've been doing today from a workshop I was in. And then the exercise was to cut them up and you rearrange them. And sometimes you get really cool stuff when you do it. So I don't know, when I've done cut-ups, I don't always keep them intact, but sometimes the way the language rearranges is very exciting to me. And I end up using a few words, a few terms, maybe my subject will change a little bit. So these are cut-ups, and you can do this with any of the writing we just did. One thing on doing erasure, which is where you're Xing out the other person's words, or doing cut-ups where you're altering your own, you might want to use your iPhone or Galaxy or whatever, take a picture of it before you take it apart. Because sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I like the first thing better, or I just don't want to lose it. I don't know, I'm possessive about my writing. I don't like to lose it. But cut-ups can be really fun for what they do to your imagination. So there's those. And then I want to switch very quickly into telling you other things you can do to make language. And then we're going to do some more writing. Does anyone remember these from your youth? Mad Libs? I'm going to assume there's a bunch of people going, oh yeah. So Mad Libs are great. They're these templates, and there's so many different choices now. Oh, I got this one for Gina. So we have the unknown bond. Yes, the Mad Libs of cats. So you go in, there's like this template, and you just fill in the words. And the thing is, especially as kids, you can be like uproariously funny and inappropriate with what you put in. But for yourself, you can just play around with it. It's just a template. You're adding your own language to, a scenario. Maybe the cat chewed the couch. I don't know what he did. But really, for me, anything that gets me to write, I'm well, not anything, but most, like, I haven't done graffiti yet, but most things I will do to try to write. This is another really, really easy way to make writing happen. Okay, this is the New Yorker magazine. It's expensive, I know. But at the back of every issue is a blank comic for you to add the illustration. And just for your own brain, if you're wanting to tune up like your writing, your creativity as a writer, this is a fun thing to do, totally low stakes. No one's going to see it. And you might write something hilarious. So those are at the back of, and some of them are just bizarre. I mean, here they're, she's trying to sell a house in outer space, I think. I don't know. So that's a source of writing. Also, my father was a crossword puzzle fanatic. Couldn't talk to the man till the crossword was done. Crosswords can be a great source if you're somebody who likes them. A great source of words that surprise you, words that might take you in a different direction in your imagination. Now, I want to show you something else. As a person who uses book arts to write, you guys probably know this very simple fold. It's a one sheet fold. I'm gonna do it wrong, but it basically makes 6 fields to write on. One, two, or is it 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's 8 with cover and back. So sometimes I just make these and I make myself write in them, and I use the form of the page as a constraint. So this is about my 4th grade teacher. She always had it in for me. She did. Passing notes. You don't ever want to do that with Miss Carter in the room. So I was using the pages to also break up like the sound of the voice, you know, here where you're like whispering and thinking. And then what's the end of it? Did I get busted? Yeah, I got busted. Dedicated to my truly crappy 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Carter, with love. So you can use just little things like that to get yourself writing. It's not like I'm going to do anything with this, but I liked what I came up with rhythmically with this little one. She always had it in for me because she did, and I was a really good student. It was like totally not fair. But sometimes the little form, if you just only want to get one word on one field, okay. Ernest Hemingway has an incredibly, oh shoot, I have to go get it, has an incredibly famous short story, and it begins, it's 6 words long, and you could do it in this book. What is the story? For sale, baby's shoes, never worn. Because, you know, the baby did not make it. But you can use, I was playing around with that for just like placement on the page where I wanted things to happen, just with that 6-word story that's really famous and gets taught a lot. But I love this little book form, just is very generative for me. So I recommend that. And I'm going to move on from that to a much larger book form that I use in a process way. I'm going to have to back up to show you. So this, I don't know if you can see it. This isn't really a book. It isn't really a broadside. It has aspects of a flag book, but not really. And I was just using this to generate text and ideas. I did have to sacrifice a super nice piece of paper, but for me, it was worth it because a lot of the language I came up with, when I just let myself play with the images and see what words I would make in response to them, and then I sewed them on and did different things. And then, you know, there's stuff happening on the back. These were all these items at very Natural History Museum in London that were being put into storage. So they're just very odd images of animals, skeletons, and things like that. So that is another way you can generate text. This is a great way. Again, kind of writing from images, sort of like what I did with the big broadside I showed you. This is a really fun graphic novel. If you have young women or girls in your life, this is a history of a lot of women you've probably never heard of. And it's a very exuberant book by a fantastic illustrator who's French. But you can just use illustrations from graphic novels to create text. Like, what if you just wrote the inner monologue of the young woman standing on the stage, or of somebody in the audience who had to be dragged there to see the performance? Graphic novels really offer a portal into writing. You can rewrite the captions the authors wrote. This is a wonderful and very strange book called The End of Summer. This young boy is very sickly and he has this cat who protects him. But there were these interesting images toward the back. I don't know if you can see them. They're just kind of blank, these images of snow. I'm not really sure what's going on, but it made me want to write something to explain or to at least give context. So graphic novels are also an interesting source of where you can make your own writing, even though there's already a lot of writing in them. And then the last thing, I have to think. Oh yeah. Okay. Remember the poetry magnets? Oh, you're reading a book that has a lot of unknown language in it? Oh, I want to know that. So the poetry magnets are just really fun to play with. And one year at the holidays, my mother, who was a pre-K teacher for 20 years, put a cookie sheet on the kitchen table with all these poetry magnets she had. We had a ball over the, holidays, you're together, you're bored. We made so many wild poems and writings, and we didn't want to get rid of them, so we were photographing them. This was not one of them, but we were putting them on the fridge. So poetry magnets, they're not that much. I just had to buy a new set. They're like $25, really worth it, because you can really just play around with language. If you don't want to do that, I also have my low rent magnet. This is a very heavy duty magnet with a post-it on it. So you could write whatever you want on there and make your own magnetic poetry. And then before we get back into writing, 2 more things I wanted to share with you, especially if you are a visual artist. This is a fantastic tool to have. It comes as a book, a big glossy book. I was really hoping I could do Gina's Fold, but oh no, the pages all broke because of the brittle glossiness. But this has all these different tabs of categories, and I use these in books I make all the time. I just cut them apart. Here's one, Signals of Danger. You can see it's in French. It's very wide ranging, the kind of stuff it includes. There's botany, zoology, a miscellany, and anatomy. So this can be a great tool, even if you don't physically cut the cards apart, as I do on a regular basis. It can be inspirational just to pull one out and write in response to what you found. Geez, the wild rose. I have a million memories of the wild rose. I didn't even recognize it was there until I'm looking at it backwards. So that can be another start. Also, this is an old-fashioned game. I hate doing stuff like this because I don't know where you would find it, but you could use your Scrabble tabs. It's called bananagrams, and it's all these, come on, banana, work with me. It's just all these tiles with letters on them. So, and they're thicker than Scrabble tiles, so they're a lot more satisfying. But you can just spell things, fake words, take a letter and riff on that. I mean, there's just lots of, the thing is, as a writer, you have to constantly be like psyching yourself into doing your thing. Last but not least, before we write, musician Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt developed this little box of cards called Oblique Strategies. And they were strategies they developed for themselves as musicians in trying to get stuff, I don't know how musicians work, but in trying to get stuff to work better. So these can be fun with writing because you just pull one out and there it says, what wouldn't you do? And you can just start making a list. Or it might just be about your piece. What wouldn't you do to this print you're making that it's having an issue, but you know you can fix it? Like, well, and I'm not willing to do this, but maybe I could do this. Here's another one. And keep in mind, they're musicians writing these. So here's another card. Abandon normal instruments. They're just all, to me, diving boards into future writing that you might keep. You know, for me, even if I write 3 pages of stuff and there's like half a sentence I like, that's a victory. Because sometimes you have to get a lot of the gunk out before you can get to where you start to write better, almost like musicians practicing all the time. One last thing for the mathy of you. Some poets, some writers use the Fibonacci sequence, and painters too. Really famous in nature. The pattern basically goes, I forget how it goes, but this is by a Swedish writer. Oh yeah, the pattern goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 3. You basically add a 1, you add the previous number to the next number, and it gets you this pattern. But her poetry is incredible, and you can see she's followed really tightly the Fibonacci sequence, and it's all about nature. There's weird associations in here. Her name is Christiansen Inger. She's quite famous in Sweden, very famous poet there. But she uses the Fibonacci sequence a lot. So some people use procedures in their writing, and there's tons of them. We just don't have time for that today. But also, this is one of my very, very favorites. When you don't know what to do as a writer, can you see it? Description. When you don't know what to do, like I had all these book reviews I was doing of books I really didn't have a whole lot of nice stuff to say about. And a friend of mine said, just describe. And that liberated me like an albatross off my neck. This is a little leaf. I love this leaf. I found it on my walk. I wanted to do something with it. And I was like, yeah, description. You can do a ton with description. So that's kind of my giveaway for you. And I think we're getting close to time. Laurel, how are we doing?
We're fine.
Do you have time for one more writing exercise?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for kind of hearing me out on all those things. Some might have worked for you, some might have not. That's okay. If there's a teeny thing you can take away and it helps you in your own work, that would make me personally really happy. And if there's not, sometimes that's the way things go, but I'm glad you're here to try it out. So this time, okay, so I have to tell you first. First, write down 3 things you love about the natural world. Real quick. 3 things you love. Even if it's staying inside in the AC to avoid it. And then try to finish that up. Okay, so some of you might still be coming up with the 3, but the rest of you should have something. So I'm going to segue a little bit to kind of give this exercise context. There's a very famous war movie about the battle at Guadalcanal in, I believe, the Marshall Islands during World War II. So it's an intense movie. You have to be up for that kind of an experience. However, the movie is called The Thin Red Line. And the cinematography in The Thin Red Line is extraordinary. And as a writer, what it made me want to do is copy the cinematography, the techniques, because they were so effective and so powerful. So that's what we're going to do. You have your 3 things that you just wrote down. And by now you know me a little. So you know I'm going to ask you to just choose one, if you could. Unless it's like the frog and the egg. They go together. But what I want you to try to do first is really think about that thing. And it's like, if you had it, let's say you're talking about a hibiscus flower. If you had it just this close to you and you could see every detail, and it doesn't matter if you haven't seen the details, make them up. Who's going to, well, you're not going to get an F. You know, every detail, really focus on that thing. And we're going to write for 2 minutes. And I want you to try to really describe that thing or talk about why it's meaningful to you, whatever language comes out, but keep it very closely focused on what it looks like, smells like, sounds like. You know, as if you had a puppy. You can't take your eyes off a puppy. Oh my God, or a kitten, right? So you'd be seeing everything. So when you're ready, any questions? Great. Let's write for 2 minutes. Really get into detail with that thing at a microscopic level. So let's go. And then start to bring this writing to a close. And start to find a place to stop. Okay, so I know some of you are still bringing it to a close. I know that's sometimes tricky to do. It's all right. You'll get there. The second part of this writing exercise, the thin red line, totally echoes what the movie does with cinematography. Again and again, it focuses very narrowly on the natural world, on the people who lived in the Marshall Islands at the time when this wars comes to them. So there's very, very close-up shots of snails, of the beach, of just the beauty of where they are. And then it expands, and then it's totality, and then it's war, because the war is total, and the war takes over everything. So I don't mean to bring a dark thing into what we're doing, but I want to try to push into our writing a way of going so close with, like, what was I was talking about air, and then try to think about it in the biggest way that you can. I mean, how do we comprehend war? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Not that I'm asking you to write about war. I'm not. I'm asking you to just take your imagination and push it. See how far you can go with this object, this experience, this natural world creature or life form, and see if you can layer onto it absolutely everything you can think of. And we're gonna do that again just for 2 minutes. Does that feel overwhelming or like a little too much?
No.
Okay, then let's go. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, right on.
Yeah.
Here we go, 2 minutes. And take another 30 seconds with this. And about another 10 seconds to bring this to a close. And find a place to stop. Okay, so bring it to a close if you're still working on it. I know it's sometimes hard to pull out of those quickly. If there's anyone who would be interested in reading what they just wrote, the small and the big, so it would be a little bit of a longer read, it would be great to hear your language.
So put your name or just say I will in the text, in the chat, and we'll call on you. Come on, someone wants to do it.
And it is okay if you feel shy. It's a longer prompt. Go, Gina!
Did I just unmute myself?
Yeah.
Okay. I wrote about clouds. So tiny is tiny droplets of water refracting light, moving almost imperceptibly, and the wind moves golden, red, white, gray, depending on its mood. It plays with the sun, solid enough to obscure sun and moon, but ephemeral enough to almost not feel when it's fog. High and thin, low and dense. And then for the macroscopic, I wrote, they bring weather, thunder, lightning, and rain, relief from drought, floods, and destruction, fill rivers, hide the sun, give us daydream fantasies, give life to all things, build mountains and hug them too, carve canyons, make our planet look white and blue from space, move constantly but always seem still.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'm hoping your read will give maybe some courage. Well, oh, you will? Great. So Susan Marsh is willing. Terrific. Let's hear from you.
I did trees. Rough bark on my hands, fissures with small insects navigating the grooves, water droplets sliding hesitantly down to impede their way, the sound of rustling leaves above and the feel of shadows and sunlight dancing on my back. I note that it has a sturdy trunk and branching arms like me. I breathe deeply and realize the air is full of oxygen because of this tree and all the plant forms on Earth. Without them, I would not be here, nor no other life would be here. How did life begin?
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. At this point, there was one last thing I was going to have you write, but I'm actually not going to have you write it because I feel like we've done a lot. I've taken you guys a lot of places. And thank you so much for everyone who was willing to read and also just participate, to be here. One of the things I would say, if you're thinking about book arts, for some of the two longer reads that we just heard, those are both ripe for going back in and pulling language out and working with images, because they're both starting in a certain way. So you can see how some of these things can go together. Like you can generate the text and then erase it, pull some out, and be left with something a little more either poetic, because I do think poetry has a lot to kind of give to book arts in terms of how they're put together with page breaks and space and silence and things like that. But my last question for everybody was going to be, since the premise of the workshop was make writing happen for yourself, and this is also Peter Elbow's technique. At the end of all my workshops, we do something called a process write. And it's where you have a chance to try to synthesize your ideas. I'm not going to ask you to write for today, but I want you to think about what are the conditions necessary for you to make writing happen. What do you need? I have 7 typewriters all over my house. No, that's not true, but almost. You know, I have notebooks all over my house because if I get an idea and I don't write it down, it goes. So think for yourself very specifically, what are the conditions you need to capture language? Because it's hard to remember it. You can try, it's hard though. So that's what I was going to have you write about so that you could take it as a keep away. Like, I need to be reading a lot. That's true for me personally, because that just gives me stuff to think about and reading about. So I don't have really anything else for us to do or to say. I feel like I've kind of talked more than I meant to, but I really hope that you got some I got some writing out of what we did and maybe have some ideas for where you might go forward. And thank you so much for coming today. And thank you, Laurel, for organizing everything.